Good meeting.
All right, I'd like to open the July 9th Town Council meeting in Town of Washington. This is we're going to have a continued public hearing from the last meeting involving the Planning Commission and the Town Council with regard to Airbnb. But first, let's first item, minutes. Any questions, suggestions, changes on them?
I just have one little clarification, okay, on the first paragraph, with that presentation. All right. Mayor Sullivan discussed that with the exception of business 211, which included Warren Avenue, Middle Street, and portions of Main Street, had not been repaved in many years.
Wait,
Something's missing.
yeah, I know. Those streets have not been repaved.
Oh, okay.
So it should be.
It should just have those streets in there after Main Street. Yeah, and then, next to
Any other questions, comments? If not, do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Second, treasurer's report, Mr. Goble.
Thank you. Total consolidated assets of the town of Washington as of 6/30/2018 were $482,214.48. During that same period, consolidated assets of the Washington Water Works was $18,992, and the wastewater works was $1,871.19. In June usage, gallons pumped, we pumped 1,027,200 gallons, we backwashed 30,700, and we billed 996,500. I mean, that left us 996,500. We billed 689,932, and we sold an additional non-metered sales of 20,000 gallons, leaving us with 286,568 treated gallons not yet billed. Total income for the town of Washington in June was $29,799.04. Total income for the Washington Water Works in June was $12,427.31. And the wastewater income for June was $11,118. On the bills to be paid, I don't think there's anything really unusual. The quarterly VML insurance came out of the town of Washington account. But other than that, I don't think there's anything that is out of the ordinary or not self-explanatory. If there's any questions, I'll answer them. And then on the additional bills to be paid, the only, our .gov registration for our 3 websites, annual payment came due for $1,200. And that's all I have today.
Question.
And okay.
Question. The VML insurance program. So does that cover the wastewater treatment plant and the water works?
It does not cover any of the conveyances.
Okay.
Nothing in the streets.
Okay. So then the question would be, should the quarterly payment be split? Is there some way of determining so that the wastewater and water
Well, the
works?
way things are now, you're just going to be paying out of the general account one way or the other. I mean, yes, maybe in the future it should be paid, but we have to have them come and tell us how much, you know,
How much each part of it
you
is.
know, what part of it is.
Okay, that's the question I'm asking.
Yeah, I get that. I don't know what that will be.
Okay.
If no other questions, do I have a motion to approve? Well, I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Huh?
Planning Commission, Mr. Catlin.
I have a report at this point. We'll wait until the public hearing.
ARB, for the meeting
18.
18th, next Wednesday. Consider a couple of items. And I guess that's it. Mr. Bennett? Anything special? All right, then let's open up or continue the joint public hearing that started last month. On behalf of the town, I declare it continued. Mr. Kaplan.
On behalf of the planning
Declare it continued.
I declare it continued.
All right, and then let's open up any comments from the public with regard to the draft ordinance for Airbnbs.
Can we comment?
Well, yeah, I was just going to see if there are any public comments, but if they're not, yes.
So, thank you for circulating this. I think we saw it this afternoon. I had one question I wanted to ask Mr. Bennett. No more than 2 guests per room at any time shall be permitted. Can we say no more than 2 adults per room? Because people sometimes sleep with babies in the room.
I was inserting the text as recommended by the planning commission instead of
I was not at the last meeting.
Yeah,
So
we did do that.
can we put that?
Well, I'm just saying, we did say to people, I was not wanting to put anything in there, I thought it could be regulations after, but we did do that. So, this is our language at this point.
Is there any reason that it could not be changed in this meeting?
I don't know.
I don't even.
Yeah. John?
At this point, procedurally, the ordinance is still before the planning commission, and you will make a recommendation when you have a final product, which hopefully will be this evening, and recommend that to council for its consideration, and council will consider how to move forward procedurally, most likely to authorize another public hearing since there's been some changes to the ordinance.
The only concern I have, Carolyn, I understand your point, I think it's valid, but the only concern I have, speaking for the planning commission, is then you get into how many children or how many non-adults would you have? Do you say 2 adults, 1 child, or how do you do it, rather than just having 2 guests?
I would think that just saying 2 guests per room really makes it very difficult for a young couple with small children, at all. And the likelihood of any enforcement on this is so low to begin with. I would rather say 2 adult children or 2 adults and leave it at that, and or whatever other than adults are there would be fine. So I would propose to move, or I do move, that we insert the word adult between 2 and guests in that phrase.
And I'm not seconding. I would leave it as is.
Well, let's have a second to that motion, and then we can have a discussion.
I would.
All right, second. So, Judy, you say you would
I would leave it
as
as is, given exactly what Alex said. Further, I guess you could have a crib in the room, if there was a crib in the room, but, one of the beauties of the ARB that's different than a bed and breakfast, during the discussion at the last meeting, is this leaves it open to children. Most of the B&Bs in this town would prefer not to have children. I think there's some exceptions to that, but for the most part, some of them, it's considered romantic and interlude, and not a lot of small children running around. I would just leave it as 2 guests and leave it at that, because frankly, at this point, after almost a year, I want this thing to move.
But if I venture to suggest that if you say it's open to children, and if you only have 1 room available and it's only 2 guests, it's actually not open to children.
I think very few people come with an infant, but there you are, go to a different B&B, that's too different.
I think trying to guess who's going to be there, who's not, and whether or not it's going to be enforced or not enforced, et cetera, et cetera. And to me, it just leaves it more open to say who adult guests without defining what else may or may not be in the room. It could be a dog or a kid or whatever.
I think you're dancing on the head of a pin. It says two adult guests.
When you're
Then
inviting
it says two
violations.
adult, well, so are you. It's saying two adult guests.
Do you have anything you want? Yeah. And then John would like to give comment, or if you'd like to defer and let John comment, and then you can have the last word.
I think we'll let John comment.
I believe that one of the philosophies behind the way the ordinance is drafted is that you want to draft it in such fashion that enforcement is not that it's pretty plain and simple, and that if there were a violation, there's conditions of special use permit that that comes back to the council for review. So it's not a situation, I think the way this whole thing is set up, where you have to have a code enforcement officer out there every night looking at everything. But most of the requirements are pretty straightforward, and if they were violated, the evidence of the violation would be pretty straightforward also.
Gail?
I think we should just leave it at 2 guests. It's simple, it's clarified. No one's going to say anything but baby glass.
What about a compromise, which is 2 adults and 1 child? No?
No.
No.
All right.
You could have 3 rooms then with a whole bunch of babies. I just think it's fine.
All right. Any more discussion? All right. There's a motion to have it read 2 adults. Those in favor, please indicate. Do you need roll
Roll
call?
call, let's have a roll call.
So, Alan Cohn,
Aye.
Judy DeSarno,
No?
Gail Swift,
No.
Caroline Nancy,
Yes.
Fred Kaplan, no.
Okay, is that what's happening?
All right, so it stays as yes. Are there, John, I feel like you're usurping your meeting. This is a joint meeting, so.
No, I think it's a joint meeting, but the process here is the planning commission's got to produce a final document for us to turn it over to us, and so you guys are just.
And I,
And so if this is the final document, and you all vote to approve it in its entirety, then we can talk about it, and we're going to advertise. So,
I move we adopt the motion, the ordinance to authorize short-term.
You have to advertise this one.
I can't, you all have to advertise it. Can't we move to adopt it? Is that what
It would be a recommendation.
Would be your recommendation.
I move that we recommend adoption of this ordinance.
Second.
any other discussion? All those in, let's have a roll call. This time we'll go alphabetically. Caroline?
Aye.
Ellen?
Aye.
Judy?
Aye.
Yeah, I forgot Kaplan, sorry. I'm sorry, Swift?
Aye.
You can work on
And
this.
you said yes?
I already said aye.
Well, no, but it has to be re-advertised, so there's going to be a joint.
No, I think the planning commission is done. In fact,
it need not be joint.
I would like,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
I am moving that we close the planning commission component of this joint meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Right.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. The planning commission meeting is closed.
They're done.
They did, we did a recommendation. Recommend.
Thank you, planning commission.
Congratulations. Hey, you know, the whole world is proud of you. We're ahead of the county, I think. Oh, yeah. Don't say it. All right.
Okay, and then John, need to close the public hearing on behalf of town council.
Yes, the comments are be appropriate if you catch that.
Just one last chance, any public comments on this draft document? Okay, I close the public hearing on this document for the town council. So, in terms of process, we need to advertise, we've got a conversation here, but I'll open this up to a conversation we're going to have about any aspect of this. So we need to advertise, vote to advertise this for,
And now it would be just before council, since there is a recommended ordinance from the planning commission. Final product.
so can we, this is where I'm unclear, can we, if we chose to vote approval of this final draft contingent on the public hearing? Well, we wait until after the public hearing.
At this point, I believe that another public hearing is required since there's been changes to the ordinance, which in my view could be considered material. So those requirements has got to be re-advertised, and all you do this evening is vote to re-advertise this final draft, if that is what council wishes to consider that meeting. If there's any changes, it should be made now,
So this is the
so we'll
time
go
for
through
council members to have
advertising.
questions or suggestions or express approval.
I have a suggestion, or I'd like to note something on page 2, which is the issuance of special use permits. Additional standards is hereby amended to add a subsection as follows. And when it talks about all applicable Virginia Department of Health standards shall be observed, I was curious to see what those standards are, so I reached out to our health department and got an email tonight from Midge Carter. And she wrote that, and I can share this with everybody, as of now, the Virginia Department of Health does not regulate Airbnbs under our tourist establishment regulations. It is assumed that they are not doing any food service of any kind. If they were, they would likely be regulated under both the food regulations and the TES regulations. Then she goes on to say, and I can share this with you guys. And she goes on to say, that said, that it's supposed to fall under the sewage handling and disposal regulations and the private well regulations to the degree that any other rental property does. If we are asked for comment, we will want to see that there is documentation of an approved septic system and that it appears to be functioning. If we have records, we may just go out and walk over the system to ensure that there is no sign of overt system malfunction. If we do not have records, we may ask the owner to expose the septic tank and distribution box, etc. We may also refer them to a private on-site soil evaluator to determine the size and potential capacity in terms of bedrooms of any undocumented septic system. Regarding the water supply, we will likely have a well construction log for wells drilled after 1982, and then it goes into wells. Anyway, I know we don't have it, but this is just something I thought I'd share with you all, that they don't have currently any regulations for Airbnbs. And she also,
So in fact, all applicable standards shall be observed, there are no standards
that's what she's saying.
from the Department of Health.
Right.
But if we didn't put there in the future, if it changes.
That's right, they may get some in the future, who knows? And so, maybe we should say any applicable, in case they change it, but right now there aren't.
Sounds good to me. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm fine.
The other thing that she sent, and I'll share this with everybody because it's really, really interesting. The 2018 General Assembly legislation now says for bed and breakfast, regular bed and breakfast operations are not limited to serving breakfast. The legislation removes the limitation that breakfast is the only meal offered. Meal service is allowed at any time under certain conditions, which I think is a huge change.
What are the certain conditions?
It does, I asked Meg, she's going to get back to me, I just got this tonight.
The town ordinance still, the town ordinance still only limits it to breakfast, right?
Well, the question is, what impact will this have on our town ordinance? Does anybody else want any of these?
And our current ordinance is explicitly limited to breakfast only.
Without a special.
You know anything about this one?
Is that, I'm not exactly sure what.
It's HB 552,
Has been adopted.
in the 2018 General Assembly. Do you have a copy of this?
Effective July 1st.
No, I'm not.
Let's do this. Why don't you take a look into that if you don't mind? And, be fairly quick.
HB,
Yeah. Give John a fire.
This really stayed under the radar. Other than some of
I wonder what other changes there might be.
But was worried about Airbnb.
Well, I just wonder what it means for the kitchen. Commercial kitchen.
that's what I asked her tonight, but she hasn't gotten back to me.
Okay, well, if John, if you look into this and let's put an agenda next month. We'll do some more homework on it. All right, so the question still at hand is, are there any other suggested changes to this final ordinance presented by the planning commission or say approved, other than change the word all to any on a short-term rental, paragraph 1? Silence me, no questions or thinking? I'm comfortable with it. I think a lot of work is going into this article.
I have nightmares at the same time. I have nightmares about the same time. I've been doing it for so long.
All right, do I have a,
Second?
what?
You moved.
I second.
Okay.
Roll call vote? Brad?
Yes.
We're voting on,
This was a public hearing. So.
We closed the board.
Oh, we're just closing the public hearing?
No,
We already
close
closed
we
it.
closed the vote.
Advertise.
Okay, advertise it.
And so to vote on.
Well, I thought you were changing any to all.
Yes.
That was your, you was
That's
changing.
what the motion is
Advertise it at that.
to advertise what is now the final document, assuming we vote for it, with the one change of all to any.
So we're voting on that one change first.
Yeah,
No, altogether.
for the whole thing.
Oh.
We're voting to advertise the
With that
entire
change.
document with that one
Okay,
change.
okay.
All right, we've got a
You got a
first and a second.
I guess over there.
Yes.
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 Okay. So we will advertise a public hearing on this final document in August. And after that public hearing, just for those who, after that public hearing, the council will A, approve this document, or B, for some reason, not approve it. But I think the intention seems pretty clear that the council is happy with the document. And the public has had adequate opportunity to discuss this. It's just we want to be very, very careful about process. All right. Old business. Task force committee meetings update. That's all you've got from.
I have one from the Housing Task Force. We had our first meeting on May 23rd. We had a second meeting in June, but the minutes of the first meeting, if they have not already on the board, will go to Laura after this meeting so that they will be available for public review. The task force members are Gary H. Sheila Gressinger, Ray Gooch, and Fred Kaplan, and Alan Kump. I am serving as the chair of the task force, and Gary H. is serving as secretary. And that meeting, we had a review of the town and the county's comprehensive plans, review of the situation in town where there are limited housing options currently available, desirability of increasing both the availability and diversity of housing options seems to be evident from public hearings and other testimony from over the last several years. And the task force members want to be sensitive to public concerns regarding location and the types of housing options. There was then discussion that included the following: consideration of existing and possible future housing options in the town, discussion of the use of the remaining portions of the town-owned Avon Hall property, discussion of concern for preserving view sheds and open spaces, discussion about the need for additional clarity regarding the existing town boundary, and discussion regarding the history of previous conversations regarding town boundary adjustments and the continuing desirability of increasing the physical size of the town. The task force then at that initial meeting came up with they came up with consensus of 4 goals. One, that the town of Washington should move forward as promptly as conditions permit to achieve the population growth identified as a goal in the 2017 Town Comprehensive Plan by supporting the creation and construction of a variety of additional housing options in the town of Washington. 2, second goal, that in order to create the necessary space for such additional housing options, the town proceed to work with the county to adjust existing town boundaries. And stage such expansion to facilitate the earliest possible acquisition of additional space for such additional housing, and do it with the support of the county, of course, and neighbors. Third goal was that in order to meet current and future housing needs, the town of Washington would explore the desirability of creating a planned unit development, or HUD, that would include a variety of housing options types consistent with the historic fabric and the existing architectural aesthetic of the town of Washington. And 4, that in order to facilitate and achieve these goals, the town secure the necessary professional expertise required by relying on whatever volunteer assistance may be available and by hiring additional consulting and management help as needed. And those are the highlights of the minutes from the May 23rd meeting, which again will be available to the public as of after this meeting. The final thing is, as we look at the possibility of developing guidelines for planned unit development, the Housing Task Force may make a recommendation to the town council to expend some limited funds to hire a consultant to help with the development of those guidelines. And that's the report from the Housing Task Force. The Tourism Task Force, do you have any report?
Yeah, well, I'm on the Tourism Task Force and the Business Development Task Force. Each of those task forces has met twice, and each of them is preparing its recommendations, so town council will have them by the September meeting. The Tourism Task Force had several people there. It was really great. The meeting we had June 11th. We also had one May 29th. And we discussed how to market the town better, attract more visitors, and enhance the visitor experience while they're here. So our next meeting is Tuesday, July 17th. It's a 2-hour, really long, but it's going to be really putting everything out on the table of what we're going to do. From 4 until 6 here at Town Hall, July 17th, Tuesday. And then the Business Task Force is, that, as I said, has met twice, and it's preparing, we're working up a draft survey to send to residents and businesses and commercial properties, asking what type of businesses they would like to see in the town, and that sort of thing. So we're preparing that draft survey, which we'll have for the September meeting too. The next meeting is tentatively set. It's either going to be July 24th or July 25th here at 7 p.m., but it's a tentative thing, and I'll let you all know when it's firmed up, and let Lauren know so she can put it in the paper.
Make sure the town is too.
And I forgot to add that the next Housing Task Force meeting is on Wednesday at 5 p.m. July 11th.
What time?
5 p.m.
ARB is not meeting that day, so we don't have.
We don't have to worry about getting kicked out. We can
Yes.
pontificate. Well,
I hope you don't go that far.
Mr. Angel will be here, but I will try to curb him.
Brad? Or do you have any more?
No.
Eloquence cannot be denied.
And so the infrastructure task force met on the 25th with Alan Comp, myself. Nancy attended, which was great. Jean Goodine let me know that she was going to be away, so just the rest of us. And generally what we did was just sort of identify the main infrastructure components that we're going to be reviewing, such as water, sewer, power, roads and streets, the electronic infrastructure, which would include phone, cable, that kind of thing, and then the actual buildings and structures that are owned and maintained by the town. From that, we then broke those down into more detail of the information that's going to get reviewed and analyzed. Under the water and sewer, it'll start with the historic, sort of where those systems came to be. The sewer system being an easy one because it hasn't been around that long. The water system being much older. We're going to do some deep dive into the actual system, the age of the system, some of the various components within the system that we're going to be looking at, upgrades and improvements, advances as we go forward. We also talked about, we were just kicking ideas around, and the idea of including and incorporating solar energy into the operation of the water and wastewater plants, and how that might be able to come about. So from that, again, we're going to be, diving into it, examining the maps and locations of all of our services and utilities, and then from there, try to formulate the needs going forward. So what improvements for each of these systems may be necessary. Things like the phones and cable, that's really up to the providers, but we hope to be able to get some insight from them as to conditions, what improvements might be forthcoming, what changes that could enhance things like our housing development, our business development, tourism, those kinds of things. So that was the synopsis of that meeting. I do owe minutes tomorrow. Our next meeting for that group will be 9 o'clock on July 23rd here in Town Hall. I have given Laura that date. So that was pretty much the infrastructure task force. The other task force is administration and finance, which was held after the infrastructure task force. Jerry indicated that he was going to be out of town that day, and so I alone was the person at the meeting, so there was no meeting. So the next meeting for that, again, will be the 23rd of July at 11 o'clock a.m. here in Town Hall. So it'll follow the infrastructure meeting. And so hopefully we can start to...
Maybe gone.
I'm not here.
You're not here in Johnson, okay. Fred, are you here?
I would love to attend, but doing morning meetings are tough.
Okay.
Evening or late afternoon works.
Okay, well, we could go to an evening on that one. Is Town Hall available all day? Okay. All right. Well, we're fine with that. If you let me know, then we can move that to the
I know there's at least one other member of the community for that finance.
Yes, yes. Hope to include that as well.
Okay.
So,
Let me remind everyone in the public and let it be reflected in the minutes that all of these task force meetings that have been indicated are open to the public, and the public are in fact encouraged to attend, to provide feedback, to offer their thoughts, and as we're going through these processes. And for those who have attended, we're grateful and hope you will continue to come.
The public is not limited to residents of the town of Washington.
We actually had a county resident come to the business development meeting.
Well, that's a perfect example, because you really can't think about business development in town of Washington without thinking about the county as a whole. Fred, how many, what are there, about 15 people, would you say, that are involved in these task forces? Something like that, 12, 15? I'm not looking for a precise number.
Yeah, I'd say that's
Right
fair.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So it's a significant number of people who are engaged in this process. It's very, very good. And more welcome. All right. Next subject, Gay Street vacation request update. John, do you want to
Well, I was
update? We have here, for those who don't know,
What?
two of the applicants, three people, two of the applicants, and their lawyer, Mike Brown. John, do you want to give some update on it?
Well, I was received a letter from Mr. Brown summarizing the actions that they're taking in the past weeks, and at the email outlining all of that is, I believe each member of the council has a copy, and I was going to ask if anyone has any questions or comments, which I was going to then relay to Mr. Brown, but since he's here, I guess you might just hear him for himself. And Mr. Brown, if you want to make any, comments?
We've gotten the ball rolling on the process. Reached out to VDOT to get their list of approved appraisers. Started the process of contacting 3 of those. This time of year it's a little bit difficult with people being away on vacation. It's hard to kind of get that rounded up. We're working on that. There was also discussion in the last meeting about the proposal would include a private easement across the vacated street to serve the property of Lisa Lethbridge. We've got that drafted, and that's the property owners in Ms. Lethbridge are all reviewing that, so we've gotten that process off the ground too. We also had a meeting today to clarify exactly what the proposal will be as far as, and this is in response to a comment from Mr. Bennett, what the proposal will be as far as the vacation of the street, how we would propose that be divided up. So my fervent hope is that by the next town council meeting, we will have all of the materials necessary so that the application will be complete, and the town council will be able to hopefully move forward in a fashion that they see fit to at least advertise the request for public hearing at that point.
Mike, would you, I think, not everybody was here at the last, would you be kind enough to give us a summary of what it is that you all would like to do?
Sure, and I'd love to have Mr. Egan or Ms. Eagle speak for just a minute as well. The proposal is that there is a sub-street, as they are commonly called here in the town, that runs from the corner of Gage Street to Wheeler Street, back along the common boundary line between the Eatman property, Ms. Eagle's property, or one of the properties, and the Lisa Leffler's property, back to the property that's now owned by the Hodges. It's unimproved, it's always been unimproved, to the best of our knowledge. It looks basically like a yard, where vehicles have been parked in the past, and there are landscape features along there. And the request is simply that the town council consider the formal vacation and abandonment of that sub-street, so that it's no longer considered part of the public street system in the town of Washington, and thereby the title to the property that's within that street, which is about 130 feet long and 30 feet wide, would simply revert to the adjoining property owners. That's the basic outline of the proposal.
And when you say adjoining property owners, that is Eagle, Lisa, George, and the Hodges?
The Hodges are just at the very end.
Yeah, the Hodges property
So they
is
don't-
on the end of there.
Okay.
Yeah. And our proposal is going to be that actually the title would revert just to the Eatman and Eagle properties. Ms. Lefkovich has indicated preliminarily that she doesn't want to be involved in acquiring any part of the vacated
She
street.
just wants access, am I right?
She just wants to be sure her access is guaranteed, and that's the purpose of that private meeting.
Does council have questions on that? Let's try and get out any questions or issues.
As an aside, I went by and talked with the Hodges.
Pardon?
I went by and visited with the Hodges and talked with them, and of course, they signed that property, but they were all in favor of it. And of course, the Stubb Street used to extend through what is now that property, and was vacated a number of years ago. So the Stubb Street actually ends at a very odd place, doesn't go through to Main Street anymore like it used to, because it was vacated, and would have been what is the Hodges property now.
The only,
It's just left over.
the only two,
Exactly. It's about a 5-foot drop also when you get there.
excuse me. The only two questions I have is that it would be nice to have some kind of, actually, before I ask that question, you were saying that Ms. Lefkovich would still have a private easement?
Yes, we are.
So she would still be able to have access to there if need be, from the back, I guess, from the back end of her property?
And Mr. Eben could probably describe this better than I can, but you can access the back of the Leftwich property, going down that little area there, and we would want to maintain that for her.
Okay, and then
It just facilitates her getting into her backyard, having something delivered that would go in the back of the house.
Sure, yeah, because she does have a slope in the front.
Right, exactly.
I appreciate that you had a conversation with the Hodges, but I think it would be helpful for the town council to know that they have given some kind of formal support.
We do that, and I'll be submitting that for the rest of the application.
And then you also submit a plat or something?
Yes.
Right.
What we'd
So
like-
there are no, the only question I have is there are no other properties that are affected by this?
That's correct. Those four, Eben, Eagle, Leftwich, and Hodges. What we'd like to do preliminarily for the purpose of completing the application is a sketch, taking one of the existing John Baumgartner or Dan Clark plats, sketch out what we have proposed, before the applicants incur the cost of a full survey. We'd like to have it, and it'll be detailed enough, it'll have dimensions and so forth, and be very clear what we're proposing. And then if the application moves forward and the town council sees fit to approve it, then it would be subject to having that final survey prepared.
At the risk of being overly technical, is it relevant that the Hodges are going to sign off on this, or the new owners? And what is the, sort of timing? They could sign off if this deal were done before the contract's signed.
Right, but I don't know what the contract is, and I don't know that they have a specific date. They said sometime late summer or early autumn, was the last time I called Cindy Hodges, so I don't know. And actually, I don't know who's buying it.
So that's not what I said, I wondered about that. I was going to answer the question. I thought
Right, I asked her, she said you'll like whoever it is, and that's what she would say, so that is there we are.
But can I say, is it pertinent if they have no easement on that stub street anymore? In the, you said on their deed, or the previous owner's deed, they had an easement on the stub street. And now they don't have a stub street, they merely border the stub street. They don't have an easement anymore?
I don't think they ever had an easement. The stub street went through to Main Street, and now it's on, what is that property? It was abandoned some time ago.
So the fact that it went through their property would lead one to believe, unless I'm wrong, that they would have been able to have access to that stub street.
At one point they did. I
And
mean,
you're-
in theory, they
Probably
do now.
would. Although there was always, no one ever used it because it was always a 5-foot drop and that's what they.
Right, and so
That
unless
property,
there's-
they have always went to the Main Street.
So unless there is some documentation that says that they ceded their rights, then we're going to assume that they have.
And to be clear, there's no private right of access. I mean, to the extent that it is a public, it is still part of the, shown as a public street, they would theoretically have the right to use that. I mean, that would be part of the point of the abandonment, is to extinguish the public right to cross that. So I think what council should correctly be looking for is some indication from that property owner that they're aware, and that they don't have any concern or objection to the idea of abandoning that public right.
And if I find out from them that there are new owners, I'll certainly go to the new owners. And meet with them and find out, tell them what we're in the process of doing. And if they want to meet with Mike.
That would be good.
There's one thing I mentioned in my letter to Mike is that I know there's this topo issue that drops off, but worse than that's been overcome and property is used. And what are the long-term implications of abandoning that street? What is behind it that could possibly be used in the future and how? I don't know the answer to that, I'm just raising it. That's a type question. In the Inn's case, they own everything back there, so that's not an issue. But in this case, it's slightly different. There's different properties, and depending on how you look at it, is there, would there, 20 years hence, be a need for this access to create traffic flow? Typically you have to have 2 entrances for fire rescue purposes and property, that type of thing. Is that an issue? I don't know if it is or not, I'm just bringing it up.
And I think that's a fair point, but I'm not sure that that's really, I don't think that there's any way that the applicants can address that in a substantive fashion. I mean, anything that I would say probably in my letter would be viewed as fairly self-serving if I tried to limit that. I think those are all fair considerations for the council to be considering in the context of the application for the abandonment.
I'd say if you have any thoughts, share it, please.
I have some, but I'll be happy to share.
Mary Ann, questions, thoughts? Well, kind of in line with John's questions, or the big issue, one is, are we giving up, I ask this question without sort of prejudice or, but is the town giving up something that it's 5 years, 10 years from now, we're going to wreck? Consider your question. And then the second question is the town compensated in some way for the value of the property, whatever the value of the property is? Excuse me, those are just two big questions. Question one, I'm not aware of what it is be giving up to. One might regret doing this 4 or 5 years. Okay, so anyway, it's left that you're going to finish getting appropriate documents. John, you and Mike are in sync with what's needed or not needed.
I'm drafting a letter right now, Mike, because I'm going to be gone from the 10th through the 17th visiting my daughter. This was planned without me knowing about it. So I'm going to miss the meeting on the 13th. And I'll be leaving Friday before the meeting, so.
13th of August?
13th of August is the meeting date. I'm leaving on the 10th through the 17th, Friday through Friday.
John, I remember full well we've been through this before, but let's review the process. They give us a request, detailed proposal. We then would hold public hearings on the subject, presumably.
Once you get to the point that there's a proposal with enough specificity and all the terms and whatnot are conceptually agreeable to the town, something that the town could consider to adopt on a technical basis, everything's there. At that point, if the town were inclined, it can authorize advertising for a public hearing. It doesn't have to. It doesn't wish to go forward. And then public hearing and there's some technical considerations.
Anything else on the subject? Thank you all. I think that's it. So let me open up public forum to discuss any subject, whatever nature. Mr. H.O., you had your hand up first.
A couple of thoughts on this last topic. I think you're absolutely right, Mayor, that those are the two key issues, but they are closely connected. If the town is not giving up anything, there's very little value.
Right.
If the town is giving up something, there could be considerable value, but then the question is, does the town want to give that up? For me, working on where housing might happen in the future, the idea of abandoning any existing public way is problematic because we've learned in the past that getting access to properties that might be developed is probably going to be the single greatest challenge of providing any additional land on which housing can be built. So as a kind of general concern, I think this is a specifically problematic application because the key lies in property not represented by the parties that are here tonight. If there's no legal way for a right-of-way to move through the current Hodges property, then that substreet has virtually no development value to the town. If, on the other hand, there is potential for the contract purchasers of the Hodges property to enter into some kind of an agreement with the developer of adjoining land so that the access to that adjoining land could be granted in a way that is legal across the backside of the Hodges property, then the substreet takes on a completely different character. Now we're sort of in the high grass. When the Hodges petitioned for the abandonment of that portion that was on their property, when they got permission to build, were there proffers? Were there conditions? Is it subdividable? Do they?
It didn't happen with us.
Yeah, I don't remember this ever happening
It
in
didn't
20
happen
years.
since I've been
I was
here.
going to ask you if you had any more information on that.
Okay. Those of you who were here, do you remember when they submitted their zoning requests and everything else to build that home on that track? I know that was there were issues, but I thought they were more to design than to location or size.
That's what came before the council.
Right.
The ARB was the
Right.
design issues. My understanding, the way they built their house, it's not subdividable under the current zoning now.
That was my impression in a conversation I had with John McCarthy, when we were talking about buildable lots and what happens when you put one on a buildable lot. What if it exceeds the specific requirements for a house? Do you see all the additional benefit? And again, this is memory, but it seems to me he said, well, that depends on the specifics of every new home built in the town. If that lot is fully occupied, it cannot be subdivided, a portion of it could not be sold off, then that makes this issue, in my mind, before the council much simpler. But if they could take 30 feet off a corner that would connect to the land line behind it, then, Alan, you know,
I would, if I may, I would only encourage members of council to actually walk that piece of property so that they understand the topography of that substreet. It's a very substantial drop off Gay Street down to where the Hodges house is. And the reason it was never used prior to this probably is because it's too steep. You can't drive down it. So and if it's already been abandoned beyond that anyway, at that level, it doesn't have much value, period.
Right.
On the other hand, the last time the council talked about Stub Streets, there was great discussion around the public benefit of abandoning that street. What we're being asked to do now, as I understand it, is abandon a street without understanding what's the public benefit of doing so. Will there be subsequent development that the town would like to encourage? Is there is there a cash payment? I don't know what it might be, but at the moment, it's a wreck of a shed full of junk that's been there for decades that I can remember. And, you know, no, not your house, the shed. And George's lovely home, which I had the pleasure of being inside of. So I think there is a question of what is the public benefit, and if it's to see half of one side of that property redeveloped, what's the idea there? What's the town's benefit in allowing that to be redeveloped or facilitating that redevelopment? Because I know the Eagles know, I've actually talked to them once many years ago about trying to buy that property, which they were not interested in, and I remember clearly that the only way you could ever develop that property is to have that land available to put in a grinder pump. That's the only way it's going to work. But if the town says, yes, we'll do that, for whatever reason, what then does the town benefit from in terms of the redevelopment? And that seems to me a legitimate question to get answered at some level of detail prior to abandoning the street.
consistent with that, my comment should in no way be viewed as opposing. But anytime this town gives anything, sells or gives anything away to private parties, it would be highly scrutinized after the fact. So as a matter of public record, determining out in the open publicly before the council votes that there's a 40-foot drop, that there's no conceivable way of accessing any other developable property, that it might aid in the beautification or improvement of an existing property, all these bits of fact should be before you, so that, God forbid, if your decision should ever be questioned or challenged, there's ample factual data upon which to base a legislative decision. This was in the town's interest to take this action. So, you know, I think you have time. I think the proposal will be detailed. If you want to go for a walk, by all means, take a walk. But that was my only point, that one would hope that the council members who vote either way would never say, gee, I wish I had known that before I cast my vote.
Slightly digressing, to me, in the context of your question and development, it's the road that you own, and I've lost track of the ownership, that goes back to the property owned by Jimmy DeBerg. In other words, if the Jimmy the Bird property were to be developed, one could make the case you would want access from K Street if,
But not the Stud Street. You'd still get.
no, I know, I'm addressing stuff that's actually the,
His it goes really from Wheeler Street to the right of Wheeler Street. Right way.
Miss Amstey.
So I want to ask a variant on the same question, which is you have a number of other sub-streets. And are we going to deal with all these sub-streets just case by case? Or are we going to say there always have to be some underlying argument behind giving them up? Now, Gary started off by saying they should be community neutral in the sense that we're not losing anything. I think a better way of thinking about it is what Alan was sort of alluding to, which is what is the community actually gaining? And if in each case you can say the community benefit is X, I think you have a much better reason to be giving up. But otherwise I think there are 3 or 4 other sub-streets. It doesn't seem to me the right way to do it is just case by case. You have to have some principles that the council would adopt, perhaps, to say, these are the conditions we need to see in place before we give up property that is communally owned by the town. And this may fulfill that requirement. I don't know. I haven't yet heard, and I'm neutral as well on it, but I haven't yet heard how the community is going to benefit from giving up this.
Well, I mean, I raised the question a few minutes ago, one way the community might benefit, the town might benefit is if the town compensated financially at some number for the street. Then we'll get into debates with what's it really worth and what isn't it and blah, blah, blah. But that is a form of benefit.
Right,
And that's the benefits that you're talking about here.
It's not enough to just say it's community neutral, i.e. we're not going to lose anything.
We think there's substantial.
We have to move to the other side of the island.
Sure.
We think there's substantial benefits for development or both for remuneration to the town. So we think that the town does benefit. Sorry.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I have 2 comments here. The one thing to keep in mind in the mix here is that the town has the right to acquire right-of-way if it's necessary under certain circumstances. That's done. So just because a property owner might not volunteer the right-of-way that is necessary for a public facility like the street, the town can acquire the right-of-way under certain circumstances. So that's one thing in the mix here. Even if there's no existing right-of-way, assume that there could be one day. And where does it go? I haven't looked at all this, so I don't know. I'm just talking theoretically here. And then we have an interesting appraisal question. That let's say the VDOT appraiser says that this little strip of land is worth $3,000. However, the benefit to the adjoining property owner from going from an unusable lot to a buildable lot goes from $10,000 to, let's say, $60,000. How's that thrown into the mix? Is that accounted for in the appraisal? Interesting question.
Isn't that why you hire someone who's recommended by VDOT to look at the value and if they consider the enhanced value to the abutting property as well?
I don't know that they necessarily do that. Mike, any comment on that?
No.
So I think that's probably an issue that council would have to. I think the VDOT appraisals I've seen, they just consider the value of the property itself. And I've seen cases where the enhancement to the adjoining property owners, they were being paid to enhance their property by a huge factor. Whether it took something to improve a street from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. So,
George, I'm looking at Google map right now. Does the Gate Street, the Stubb Street, you have a low brick wall or something in front of your house? It seems to show some kind of wall or something. And you just have a patio that goes out in front of your house.
There's the hedge.
That's the hedge.
That's the hedge.
So the hedge looks like, and I'm not trying to imply that you're infringing or anything, but it looks like the hedge is right in where the street would, if you extended Gay Street.
It was put there well before I bought the house. It was there sometime.
And again, if you extended it out, it would go right past the hedge's front door. If that stub street were extended straight out.
Yeah, the stub street would go, it would follow the front of my, my house, it would go in front of my house.
Right.
Fred, and down significantly.
Yeah.
You don't see a huge drop.
I don't see it on, and how much does that drop?
I'd say it's about 12 feet.
12 feet?
Oh, at least.
Yeah.
It's not something you can walk up and down here.
I suspect that had Gay Street been an easy drive out to me when it originally existed, it would have been in use and stayed that way. But it's just too steep.
Think about,
Again, just go look, it's worth.
Well, maybe I'm
think about the drive out Main Street as you go past Allen's. That's the same topography that extends back along that line, so it's significant.
Yeah.
In looking at all of this, you have to remember, and talking about the stub street and the road that goes down to Jimmy's place, you have to remember that that was originally a schoolhouse. George's house
It's a two-room schoolhouse.
was a two-room schoolhouse.
Right.
So it could be back when it was a schoolhouse that little thing was like parking or whatever. So it's, just wanted to remind everybody, there was a schoolhouse, so even the original road, Wheeler extended, what, 2 feet outside your front door, your side door, George? Yeah.
Close to the side.
Right, yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Jimmy Brewer had done and changed that.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on this or any other public comment, question? If not, let's close the public forum. And no closed session, I have a motion to.
Before we do that, do we have any update on the hydrant on Peatland Avenue? Did we get reactivated? Okay. What are we waiting
Money?
for?
We're also waiting for the repair part, but no, we haven't scheduled that repair.
Okay, so what, because I was out there, I didn't see them when they were digging. No,
Like needs a new, a gasket or something on it. I think it would be best if we talk with Craig, and he can explain it to you clearly.
okay.
That's what you're gonna have to start talking to Craig.
Okay.
But right now, there's no funds. We have to look at that.
Okay.
We have to schedule the repairs for when, right now with the 2 water leaks that we've had, we want to figure out something.
Okay. That's good. That's great.
All right, anything else?
Talk to Craig with the mayor.
Well, I move we close, adjourn, close the meeting. Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.